Picture it, the 1970s. A new kind of fear is sweeping across America. A new type of killer, one who seems to operate without any rhyme or reason. They chose victims at random, driven by motives that just left law enforcement completely baffled. This chaos, this national search for answers, well, that's right where our story kicks off. So here's what we're going to dive into. We'll look at the rise of this new kind of criminal, the pretty revolutionary tools the FBI came up with to hunt them, and how it all played out with two of the most infamous names of the time. And then we'll see how one killer celebrity sparked this incredible legal fight over money, free speech, and victims' rights that, believe it or not, is still going on today. You have to understand, the problem for police back in the 70s was just terrifying. All of a sudden, they're facing this wave of murders that had no traditional motive. No robbery, no revenge, no obvious link between the killer and the victim. It was a totally new kind of violence, and it created this special kind of panic. The old police playbook, it just wasn't working. So, to fight back, the FBI's behavioral science unit started cooking up something totally new and, frankly, pretty controversial at the time: criminal profiling. The whole idea was to get beyond just the physical evidence, the fingerprints and the fibers, and to actually analyze the killer's behavior at the crime scene to build a psychological sketch of who they were looking for. One of the first big techniques they came up with was geographic profiling. It's actually a pretty cool idea. By literally putting pins in a map where the crimes happened, profilers could start to figure out an offender's anchor point. Their home, their job, someplace central to their life. They were trying to find the center of the spider's web, using location as a clue to who was at the middle of it. And building on that, they developed something called behavioral evidence analysis, or BEA. This was a much more holistic way of looking at things. So if geographic profiling is all about the where, BEA is all about the how and the why. It meant digging into everything: the crime scene, the victim, all the forensic details, to paint a much, much richer picture of the offender's personality. But maybe the most famous, and let's be honest, most debated idea to come out of this whole period was the organized versus disorganized dichotomy. The theory was pretty simple. You could sort these killers into two basic buckets. On one side, you've got the organized killer. They're smart, meticulous, totally in control. And on the other, the disorganized killer, impulsive, chaotic, leaving a total mess behind. It was this simple, powerful idea to give police a starting point, even if, as they'd find out, reality was a whole lot messier. Okay, so how did this brand new toolkit actually hold up in the real world? Well, let's put it to the test against two of the killers who really came to define this whole era of fear: Ted Bundy and David Berkowitz. For a long time, Ted Bundy was basically the poster child for the organized offender. The guy was a law student, he was intelligent, he was charming, and his crimes were planned down to the last detail. He'd use these elaborate tricks, like faking an injury with the cast, to get his victims to trust him. It just showed a chilling level of control and plan. But, and this is a huge but, this is where the theory starts to get a little fuzzy. Even the researchers who came up with it later admitted that reality is rarely so black and white. It's more of a spectrum. And Bundy himself was living proof. His final, absolutely frenzied attack at the Chi Omega sorority house? It was anything but organized. It was brutal, it was chaotic, and it showed a guy who had totally lost control, proving that even a textbook case can slide all the way to the other end of that spectrum. And then you get David Berkowitz, the son of Sam. And wow, he was a real puzzle for profilers. On the one hand, his attacks seemed random, totally impulsive, classic disorganized behavior. But then he was also writing these taunting letters to the police and the media. That showed a desire for control and engagement that just didn't fit the disorganized mold. He was a confusing mix of both. And this just perfectly illustrates the real-world limits of profiling back then. Because for all the groundbreaking theories, investigators later came right out and said that the deciding factor in catching both men was pure dumb luck. Bundy got caught because of a routine traffic stop, and Berkowitz, a simple parking ticket, led police right to him. So these captures really showed the limits of the science. But as it turns out, Berkowitz's case wasn't just a challenge for investigators. His arrest was about to create a whole new one for the legal system. See, the story doesn't end when Berkowitz is put in handcuffs. Not by a long shot. In fact, his capture was just the beginning of a totally different kind of firestorm, one that would change the rules for crime, fame, and the law forever. Pretty soon after his arrest, rumors started flying around that Berkowitz was about to get a major book deal to tell his life story from his jail cell. The very idea that a man who had terrorized an entire city could now get rich from that same terror, well, it caused an immediate and massive public outcry. The number being thrown around was $250,000. Now, to put that in perspective, in 1977, that was an astronomical amount of money. The public saw it as a disgusting reward for murder, and the demand for someone to do something was deafening. And New York's legislature responded with incredible speed. I mean, really fast. They passed the very first Son of Sam law, a totally new kind of statute designed for one purpose and one purpose only, to grab any money a criminal made from selling their story and put it into a fund for their victims. But, in their rush to solve one problem, stopping criminals from getting rich, the state accidentally created a much bigger one. This new law was on a direct collision course with one of the country's most fundamental principles, the First Amendment right to free speech. So this law just sat there for years. But then, in 1991, the publisher Simon & Schuster, who had a book deal with an ex-mobster, decided to fight it. They took the case all the way to the Supreme Court. And in December of that year, the court came back with a unanimous, game-changing decision. The court was facing this huge constitutional dilemma. On one side, you had New York arguing they had a compelling state interest in making sure victims get compensated. Makes sense. But on the other side, the publisher argued that the law punished speech based on its content, that it was basically a financial penalty for talking about one specific topic, your own crime. Ultimately, the Supreme Court struck the law down. They said it was over-inclusive. Justice Sandra Day O'Connor pointed out that the law was written so broadly, it could accidentally apply to some of the most important books in history. Think about it. Works by St. Augustine, Thoreau, Malcolm X, all of them wrote about crimes they'd committed. Under this law, their profits could have been seized. It just went way too far.
So after all that terror, all that innovation, and all those legal battles, where are we today? What's the lasting legacy of this really turbulent time?
Well, criminal profiling is now a standard part of police work, but it's gotten way more sophisticated. Today, it involves huge databases, data analysis, and much deeper psychology. But that core challenge? It's exactly the same. How do you turn a theory about behavior into a real clue that helps you catch a real killer?
And what about the law? Well, it wasn't a total loss. New York and a bunch of other states went back to the drawing board. They rewrote their Son of Sam laws to be much, much narrower. Now they focus on seizing the direct profits from the crime, like, say, stolen money, instead of just going after income from books and movies.
And all of this leaves us with a question that is just as real and as difficult today as it was back in 1977. In a society that deeply values both justice for victims and the fundamental right to free expression, where do we draw that line? It's a balance our legal system, and really all of us, are still trying to figure out.